So when I mentioned the name Starfox Zero to the few of you who played this game, we all know this video is going to be about a very touchy subject. I'm sure I'm not alone remembering the first time playing Starfox Zero, and it betrayed the way we thought it would play. It looks so much like the original games, but then it plays so differently. But you know what, as far as that goes, I like playing it after the third time beating it. I'd put Starfox Zero on my top 4 as far as Star Fox games go. And I'd say that was more of a mission complete than a mission accomplished. So the mandatory gamepad motion controls was one of everybody's major complaints about the game. Not to mention needing to pay attention to 2 screens at the same time, where the third person camera, which was better to look at for flying, was not as good as shooting with the first person camera, which was terrible for flying. Nintendo wanted to argue that the Wii U could provide a unique gaming experience to investors now that it was crunch time for a console that was selling too low to keep afloat. And I believe at that point though, most people have already sold their Wii U's or haven't used them in a very long time. And there was even rumors around going about the Nintendo NX being in the works, which now we all know has come out and is called the Nintendo Switch. This was all spelling bad news for Starfox Zero, even prior to its release. So when Starfox Zero was released, it got its own TV commercial and an animated short which had the look of a Saturday morning cartoon. It wasn't easy getting everyone back on the bandwagon after 10 years of silence. Strange how this game was rated E for everyone, considering how you would expect a child to intuitively make sense out of these controls. Even grown adults, who were the majority of people even playing this game, found the controls to be overcomplicated and an immediate source of frustration. Personally, I wish there was more like Sin and Punishment 2, where I would have controlled using the Wiimote and the nunchuck, and I'm sure other people would have preferred something else like the Pro Controller, the Classic Controller, or even the Game Controller, or at least, at the very least, go without having to use the gyroscopic controls on the gamepad. Which leads me to my next point. The button mapping reminded me of a modern shooter instead. The actions normally assigned to the face buttons were moved to either the right analog stick or the trigger buttons, which for me took a lot of getting used to. I think that was the biggest mistake, to revamp the button mapping, meanwhile trying to introduce new mechanics to the same formula which honestly did not need any improvement. The other biggest mistake was putting somersaulting and U-turn on the analog sticks. I've never performed one of those maneuvers on purpose with the analog sticks. They should have just kept them solely on the X and the B buttons. But over time, the motion controls got easier for me to control once I started using my elbows to turn the gamepad instead of my wrists, and then I had to prioritize staring at the gamepad to shoot on enemies while peeking at the TV to make sure that the R-Wing wasn't flying into anything. I'm not justifying these control decisions by any means, but understanding them was not impossible. And once I did get used to all that, that's when I started feeling like I was playing Star Fox. Shooting harmless enemies which were easily avoidable, and then shooting the glowy spots on a boss to make it blow up. Simple, but still a lot of fun. Now, what wasn't a lot of fun was the fact that I had to play as a walker, and the controls felt nothing like the one in Star Fox 2. The walker in Star Fox 2 had linear movements mapped to the D-pad while turning left and right with the use of the R and L shoulder buttons. Again, this was another opportunity for Nintendo to keep legacy controls consistent into their newer games by having left and right banking mapped to the R and L buttons on both the R-Wing and the walker. Holding the left trigger just to strafe is annoying, especially since you have 2 analog sticks that you could have mapped one of them to do that. And hovering was terrible, you had to stop ascending even if you haven't run out of boost fuel yet. And the gyroing wasn't anything special. It just slowed down the pace of the game, and luckily it's only around for 1 level in story mode. And the idea of hacking is cool, but you could have just kept that as a special feature on the walker instead of having it on some other vehicle. Okay, let's talk about all the good parts of this game. Firstly, I like the story mode menu, so now you can replay a level that you've unlocked and play it over and over and get better at it, rather than starting over from the beginning every single time. Next was the Landmaster. It finally had all range mode missions and boss battles, and those were some of the most fun parts of the entire game. Then there was the production value, i.e. the visuals, the soundtrack, and the voiceovers were all we expect from Platinum Nintendo. Great job. And the forking path progression is still a lot of fun to figure out on your own to get from level to level. This is a game that's rewarding just on trial and error, and my new favorite touch is that when you're in a dogfight against Starwolf, that everything goes in slow motion when you fly up close to them. It makes everything feel very intense and is a great throwback to the introduction to Super Smash Bros. Melee. Very cool. And lastly were the levels themselves, full of enemies in tight geometric formations, cameos from familiar favorites, intense dogfights in all-range mode, and bosses grand in scale that once defeated felt very satisfying to see explode and feel the rumble from the gamepad. I'm very happy that Nintendo and Platinum kept the plot and the gameplay as faithful to the original Super Nintendo games in Star Fox 64. Hopefully future titles will play and continue from the Starfox Zero canon, which will then rope back in all the other storylines from the other Star Fox games like Adventures, Assault, Command, and including Guard. For a game that takes place in space, it's so easy to just make up a Lilat system with faraway planets to explain why some characters or enemies don't make it in other installments, meanwhile some do in others. Make everything canon. Just put it all together, like in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. And if there's anything I think Nintendo should take away from the upcoming Starlink Battle for Atlas, it's that the next Star Fox game should have an open-world approach, similar to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, but still have the personality and gameplay like the 4 traditional Star Fox games.
An open-world approach would complement how traveling across space in Star Fox 2 was an integral part of that game. And given the missions in Sector Gamma and the asteroid field in Star Fox Zero, there's a lot of creative potential to ensure that traveling across space would not be a tedious experience before reaching a place of importance. The very last thing I would want to happen to the Star Fox franchise was if it became just another vacant open-world game bloated with repetitive busywork. But I think if Nintendo was capable of revamping The Legend of Zelda, then they should be able to do the same thing with Star Fox, now that Platinum has proven their ability to translate the traditional Star Fox formula into the modern era.
And hopefully this time the plot actually moves forward. We know the basics, tell us a little more without making any more new characters, and there's plenty already that exist in the Lilat system, they just need to all tie together somehow. And lastly, let's keep the vehicle variety simple. Keep the R-Wing, the Landmaster, and if you're gonna bring back the Walker, keep it simple like the way it was in Star Fox 2, and bring back the Blue Marine so then I could fight another giant terror from the deep. Thanks for watching. If you have any of your own opinions on Star Fox Zero or any of the other games in the series, Starlink, let's talk in the comments section. Till then.